a momentous occasion. The Minnesota State Board of Investment, or SBI, has divested from almost all of its Israel bonds. It's a turning point for the state of Minnesota, away from complicity with Israel's genocide in Gaza and from its long-standing systems of apartheid and occupation. Minnesota public employees, pensioners, and activists for a free Palestine have been pressuring the SBI to divest from Israel bonds for more than a decade. Many of the speakers you will hear from today and the organizations that they represent have been part of this long campaign. We meet here today to highlight this people's victory. As we stand here, Israel's credit rating has cratered, as has its public support. 76% of Democrats now support a ban on the purchase of Israel bonds. 40% of American Jews believe that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And that number is much higher for young Jews. The winds of change are blowing. The SBI has finally, belatedly, acted in accordance with this new reality. So let's go ahead and hear from our speakers. Our first speaker is Abir Ismail. Abir is a math teacher in Minneapolis, a member of the Minneapolis Federation of Educators and of the Minnesota Educators for Palestine.
Hello. So, as I just get introduced, my name is Abir Ismail. As educators, we dedicated our life to helping children build a better world. That is why it is impossible for us to stay silent while our retirement money funds the violence and the oppressions of Palestinians. Yes, the State Board of Investment may have divested some bond funds from Israel, but our pensions are still tied to companies that profit from occupations, brutality, and the abuse of innocent children and families. We will not stop speaking until they divest completely. From Gaza to Jenin, from Khalil to Jerusalem, Palestinians live under constant occupation. Families displaced, children denied access to food and water, schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods are demolished. For example, Ahmed Banasra was just a 13 years old boy when he was kidnapped, tortured, and held in isolation cell for years under horrific conditions with no proper medical or mental health care. A child whose only crime was being born Palestinian. And the state that profits from this cruelty is the same state our pensions are currently supported. Last year, 5.6 billion of our state pension funds went to companies fueling destruction in Gaza, including my own $600. As educators, our demand is clear: full divestment of our pensions now. We dedicated our life to helping children imagine a better future. And we refuse to have our retirement saving tied to the destruction of another generation's future. Last April, we empowered Education Minnesota delegates to pass an action item to create a task force to investigate how our pensions are invested. To the State Board of Investment, we say this clearly: every day you delay full divestment, you choose to keep our futures complicit in the suffering of Palestinian children. Every dollar that remains invested in occupations is a dollar stolen from justice, from peace, and from humanity itself. You have the power to act. You have the power to act, and we will keep organizing, keep speaking, and keep showing up until not a single penny of our pension funds oppression and genocide. Thank you.
Thank you, Abir. Our next speaker is Michael Yost, research analyst at the Minnesota Department of Revenue, member of the Labor Union for State Workers, MAPE, and a member of the Solidarity Caucus, a rank-and-file movement of state workers organizing for justice in Palestine.
My name is Michael Yost. I'm a member of MAPE Local 401 and a vested member of the MSRS General Pension Plan. 2 years ago, I was among a small group of state workers who began meeting to discuss how to push our union, MAPE, to oppose the genocide in Gaza. We saw labor unions across the country calling for a ceasefire, and we wanted our union to follow their lead. But we also agreed that a statement alone would not be enough. We knew that our pensions were financing the genocide through investments in Israel bonds and the stocks of Israel's weapons suppliers. We could not accept our complicity. We wanted our pensions divested from genocide. So we did what labor unions do. We organized our coworkers. We called our group the Solidarity Caucus. We spoke at local union meetings. We spoke at quarterly meetings at the State Board of Investment. We helped start Minnesota Labor for Palestine, joining union members from across the state to fight for a free Palestine. Last fall, we wrote a resolution for consideration at our union's highest governing body, the Delegate Assembly. That resolution called for a comprehensive human rights standard for pension investments, as well as a standard for our union's own strike fund investments. After hundreds of one-on-one conversations with fellow state workers, the day of Delegate Assembly arrived, and to our delight, our union passed our resolution with a decisive majority. The Solidarity Caucus continued to build up and speak out. Today, we know our efforts were not in vain. I welcome the news that SPI has sold many of its Israel bonds, but it's not enough. The board must adopt a comprehensive human rights standard for its investments and get our pension dollars out of the business of war and genocide for good. As we speak, Israel is violating ceasefire agreements in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Israeli settlers dispossess Palestinians in the West Bank, stealing homes and homelands. Our pensions are invested in companies like Elbit Systems, which supply weapons to the Israeli military. And Israel is not the only horrific government that is backed by our pensions. Pension contributions come out of my paycheck every 2 weeks. That money is paying for investments in many of the worst human rights offenses across the globe. Our pensions are invested in Saudi Arabia, where journalists are murdered with impunity. Our pensions invest in El Salvador, where Trump has sent our immigrant neighbors to be tortured without due process. Our pensions are invested in the United Arab Emirates, the most prominent backer of the rapid support forces in Sudan, where every day entire towns are exterminated. I do want to commend the SBI for taking the steps that they have. Israel bonds are clearly a bad investment, both morally and financially. As a state worker, I do not want my retirement paid for with blood money. Today I will celebrate our progress, but tomorrow we're back to work because there is so much work left to do. Thank you all. Long live Palestine.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Lucia Smith, who receives a pension through the Teachers Retirement Association and is active with WHAM, Women Against Military Madness, and the Minnesota MNBDS Community. Lucia?
Thank you. Here's my new Teachers Retirement most recent newsletter. I receive a pension through the Teachers Retirement Association, and I wish I didn't need it because it implicates me in genocide and decades of violent repression in Gaza, the West Bank, and in Israel too. I've worked for several years to convince the 4 elected SBI officials, you know, the governor, the AG, the auditor, and secretary of state, they must initiate divestment from Israel and its corporations. Why Israel? Because I was convinced in 1988, when I visited Israel and the militarily occupied West Bank and Gaza, that Israel operates a vicious apartheid system. Because I met 2 12-year-old Palestinian boys hospitalized in Gaza City who had been shot by Israeli soldiers using bullets manufactured in Pennsylvania. It seems the elected officials of the SBI fall back on fiduciary responsibility and defer to staff who focus on the highest returns possible. I could suggest that there would be enormous returns from the sale of fentanyl-laced cocaine or human trafficking of teenage girls. Ugh. Now, thinking again about the kids. TRA includes retirees from public and charter schools and from our state colleges and universities, and those pensions comprise 31% of the total amount of public retirement funds of the $101.2 billion managed by the State Board of Investment. I don't think I've ever met an educator pensioner who thinks it's okay for Israel or any other country to traumatize and kill children. People who work on a daily basis with young children and teenagers treasure those precious human lives. We don't want our pension income tied to immoral activity. SBI officials have repeatedly told some of us privately that they cannot make a political divestment decision unless the U.S. Congress or the Minnesota legislature first require or recommend divestment. I celebrate our new knowledge about the sale and non-renewal of all but one of the Israel bonds held by the SBI. It's clear that the four elected officials are not the experts making these financial decisions. Instead, we all rely on the SBI Executive Director, Jill Schertz, and the 46 staff members of the SBI, plus the various private investment corporations they use. That's who I want to focus on as we continue to press for divestment and from Israel's corporations, in particular Elbit Systems, which manufactures killer drones, ammunition, and military surveillance technologies, including those used on the U.S. border with Mexico, based in Haifa in Israel. I plan to continue my in-person presence if future SBI meetings are held in public. I'll go up to meetings of the Investment Advisory Council too. I will continue to demand that the Executive Director and the representative staff members meet with the delegations from the BDS community. We must be seen and heard by those investment experts who actually make decisions that tie me to violence and the recent deaths of, I'm projecting 70,000 Palestinian people in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. Next, I want to introduce Mary Kleider, who is a member of Jewish Voice for Peace, Twin Cities.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Barry Kleider. The last name is spelled Kleider. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. We're here today celebrating Minnesota's divestment from Israel bonds. The people of Minnesota are telling the world we do not condone Israel's genocidal conduct in Gaza. We're saying we will not grow our retirement funds by dropping bombs on sleeping children, and we will not earn dividends from mass starvation. Today's divestment also creates an opportunity for us to invest in people, places, and things that make us proud of our state. Our victory today is happening because again and again and again, we packed the quarterly meetings of the State Board of Investment until they went away and went online. We told our elected officials we knew Israel bonds were a poor investment. We lobbied against giving financial backing to Israel, a country with one of the worst human rights records since World War II. This victory belongs to the hundreds of students who camped out at the University of Minnesota in April last year, night after night after night, in the cold and in the rain. They had two demands: ceasefire and divestment. Shout out please to the Anti-War Committee, the Minnesota Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Community, the Free Palestine Coalition, and yes, Jewish Voice for Peace. Most of all, this is a victory for the people of Gaza. Every parent everywhere in the world deserves the right to say goodnight to their children and expect to see them alive in the morning. I can't say this strongly enough. A small group of ordinary citizens gathered often enough, spoke clearly enough, argued passionately enough, often enough to make our state officials stand up and pay attention. People power works. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Next, I want to introduce Karen Redleaf Schraufnagel. She's a founding member of the Minnesota BDS Community, an anti-Zionist Jew. She's been trained as an economist at the University of Minnesota and Northwestern University. She worked as a financial stock analyst for many years. And I want to also make note here, give credit to Karen, who submitted the data practices request that revealed the detail of the SPI trading transactions. And that was a key step in our being here today. Karen.
Way more than one request. On Monday, October 20th of this year, in response to repeated Data Practices Act information requests, Minnesota BDS Community received a PDF of an Excel spreadsheet from the State Board of Investment, which reported on trading in State of Israel bonds between January 1st, 2009 and October 16th, 2025. We have been trying for years to obtain information which allows us to track the actual bond trading, in contrast to the twice-yearly asset listings which the SBI publishes, a snapshot which doesn't allow for meaningful analysis. You can see some of these snapshots, I put them out here. For the first time, we can see buy and sell data for individual bonds. The data provided indicate that the SBI are heeding our demands and divesting from State of Israel bonds.
Yes, they are.
Our analysis of the data provided allows us to report the following. Although there were purchases of Israel bonds in 2020 and 2021, no bonds have been purchased since January 11th, 2023. While the bonds were being bought and sold over the course of 2020 to 2023, since January 11th, 2023, we see only sales and one maturity. Since January 23rd, 2023, all but one bond has been sold, with a remaining balance of $470,000. On July 1st of this year, a $10 million bond came due. It was allowed to mature and was not replaced. During the time covered by the SBI spreadsheet, there were two bonds that were carried to maturity and therefore received full face value at redemption. But apart from these two bonds, all the bonds which we have purchase and sale data for were sold at a loss. Reported losses on these bond sales exceeded $800,000. There was an additional sale for which data was not provided, a $9.7 million Aid Israel bond, which carried a higher interest rate of 5.5% and a U.S. government guarantee, making it different from the other bonds, which are senior unsecured Israeli state debt. We believe the loss on the sale of this particular bond, the $9.7 million Aid Israel bond, was more than $1 million. But this is informed speculation as no data was provided. While the SBI was losing money on these investments, they continued to argue publicly that fiduciary responsibility required them to make and hold these investments. This claim was made repeatedly by both SBI board members and staff. The revelation of substantial and repeated losses seems to indicate that neither purchasing nor holding these bonds was ever about fiduciary responsibility. We are very close to achieving total divestment from State of Israel bonds. On to Elbit Systems.
Thank you, Karen. Next, I'm going to introduce Seema Shaksari, an anthropologist and an associate professor in the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies at the University of Minnesota, and a member of the Educators for Justice in Palestine.
My name is Seema Shaksari, first name S-I-M-A, last name S-H-A-K-H-S-A-R-I. With approximately 28,000 employees, the University of Minnesota is the 6th largest employer in Minnesota and the 2nd largest employer of Minnesota's state employees. As a professor at UMN, I'm appalled that my pensions and the pensions and retirement funds of 27,000 workers are invested in the genocidal state of Israel, as well as companies that are complicit with the Israeli state and companies that produce weapons used by the Israeli occupation forces. As of March 2024, the university had investments in 33 Israel-based companies and 8 US companies complicit with Israel's genocide in Gaza. That is at least $2.4 million of investments in stocks and bonds of publicly traded Israeli companies such as Nova, Tiva, and several Israeli banks, and $2.6 million of investments in other publicly traded companies, including US-based defense contractors such as Boeing, General Dynamics, and Lockheed Martin. In May 2024, UMN students agreed to end their encampment to negotiate with the university leadership about divestment. As a part of this negotiation and per students' unwavering demands, the university released some of its public investments, but did not and still has not disclosed other investments, claiming that some of those investments are protected by non-disclosure agreements or other legal constraints. The UMN leadership broke their promise to negotiate with students, and in August of 2024, the Board of Regents, behind closed doors, drafted and passed a resolution refusing to divest from Israeli genocide. Not only does UMN continue to invest students' tuitions, and they keep raising student tuitions by 7.5% by 2026, not only does UMN continue to invest student tuitions and workers' pensions in Israeli genocide and weapons manufacturing companies, it has strengthened its ties with the war industries by selling 60 acres of land to Northwind, a company that has a contract with UMN and the Department of Defense to develop and test hypersonic missile technology. Shame on them. The state of Minnesota is giving a $50 million forgivable loan. Let that sink. $50 million forgivable loan to Northwind for the development of the Minnesota Aerospace Complex. Northwind is also receiving $99 million from the U.S. Army, and the University of Minnesota has also received a $10 million federal contract from the U.S. Army to develop tools for hypersonic modeling and simulation. The University of Minnesota is a signatory to the Principles of Responsible Investment, which is a guide for investors to integrate environmental, social, and governance factors into their investment practices. Yet the university, which has received over 187,000 acres of stolen indigenous land through the Morrill Act of 1851, and continues to profit from its land grab status, has violated the principles of accountability and transparency by investing and contracting with entities that have horrifying environmental, social, and governance effects in Palestine and right here in indigenous Dakota land. The actual number of humans the genocidal Israeli regime has killed in Gaza in the past 25 months is estimated to be over 300,000 people. All Gaza's universities are demolished, and the environmental catastrophe caused by Israel's bombs and destruction is beyond comprehension. As a faculty member and a member of UMN Educators for Justice in Palestine, I condemn the UMN leadership's unethical investment practices and demand that the university divest from Israel and weapons manufacturing companies. The university's mission should be education and protection of life and the environment, and not its destruction for profit. I salute Minnesota's activists who have succeeded in pushing the SBI to divest from most of Israeli bonds. This victory gives us hope that we can also make the University of Minnesota divest from Israel and the deadly war machine that includes weapons manufacturing companies. UMN is a public university, and it is every Minnesotan's tax dollars and not just UMN workers' pensions and students' tuitions that are spent on genocide. So it's all of you who have to participate in asking for divestment. And we are all inspired by the Palestinian people's resistance, not just during the recent genocide, but throughout Israel's ongoing apartheid and genocidal violence in Palestine since 1948, and before that under the British mandate. We in Minnesota can and will fully divest from the Israeli apartheid and genocide. Free Palestine.
Thank you, Seema. Next, we're going to hear from Chelsea Sunderland, a lifetime Minnesota resident, a mother of 3, and a dedicated member of the Anti-War Committee.
Thank you, Bob. I am so honored to be here today speaking for the Minnesota Anti-War Committee. We at the Anti-War Committee are so excited to start seeing the fruits of our labor. We and so many others have worked so very hard to get to this day, the beginning of divestment from apartheid and genocide perpetrated by Israel and backed by the US. So many factions in our community have come out to support this cause. You've heard from many of them today. I want to just throw a list out there of some others. Veterans for Peace, Women Against Military Madness, Jewish Voice for Peace, Healthcare Workers for Palestine, Climate Justice Committee, Twin Cities Coalition for Justice, Labor for Palestine, Taking Back Pride, Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, Students for a Democratic Society, Minnesota educators, parents, children, and so many more members of our community have helped us with this campaign and brought it to light. It is becoming more and more clear that US militarism, colonialism, and capitalism are harming all of us, which is the root cause for being here today. We stand here successful in starting the snowball of divestment from a country that thinks it can fool us into thinking they need to defend themselves against a population they illegally occupy and commit unprovoked violence on a daily basis, whether through traditional violence like beatings and shootings, or less obvious violence like restricting access to health care and water. Did you know that happens over there? A country that wrongfully conflates that it represents Jewish folks around the world when it in fact does not. A country who says that legitimate criticism of their government and their human rights violations is one and the same with anti-Semitism, which is a real and truly harmful thing that our Jewish community faces. But that's not what this is. No, we know the truth. Israel is the aggressor and the occupier. The veil is lifted, and we in Minnesota have had enough. Take our money out of apartheid and genocide. We do not support it, and our money shall not fund it. The SBI manages $155.9 billion, and these investments that we demand divestment from are a mere 4% of that. As they have proved by this partial divestment of all but one bond, they can easily move this money without jeopardizing anyone's pension, which we never want. We love that Minnesota public workers have pensions for their retirement. But pension workers themselves and Minnesotans from all walks of life are saying, we don't want that money funding weapons manufacturers and others profiting off of the destruction and genocide of a people. We demand the SBI divest its last remaining Israel bond, pledge not to buy any more bonds from Israel, be more transparent about the Israeli bonds it purchased in the past, including who was responsible for each bond, and to divest from the billion plus remaining dollars in other complicit companies. Please visit divestmn.com for more information. We update it as often as we can when the new information comes out. Free Palestine, and thank you.
Chelsea, is Sanaa here? Anyone see her?
Yes.
Okay, I want to introduce Sanaa Wazwaz, a member of the American Muslims for Palestine, and a member of the Palestinian Families Delegation that Governor Walz refused to meet with.
Just to be clear, he refused to meet with us because we're too powerful. Yeah. Let's get a round of applause for divestment. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of picture the SBI quietly after our million disruptions and really fire speeches being like, oh, all right, we'll divest. God damn it. But they chose to be cowardly about this and do it quietly instead of publicly posturing themselves with human rights. It's a test. Can somebody raise the volume of this? Is this as loud as it goes? Is that louder? Is it? Am I just hallucinating it? Okay. They chose to do it quietly. They chose to do it cowardly because they didn't want to publicly confess to the power of our movement. They didn't want to publicly testify to how much leverage we have, or how much civic pressure that we can leverage over them. They chose to be stingy and decide to hold on to a remaining millions of dollars in companies that are not explicitly Israeli, but are working on aiding and abetting Israel's Zionist colonial system. Other speakers spoke about this. But one thing I want to highlight today is what Bob just mentioned when he introduced me. It was 1 year ago that Governor Walz was in this building, just a room away from the Palestinian Families Delegation who'd lost lives at his hands. Just 1 year ago, he was literally one room away from us and decided to walk out because he didn't want to talk about divestment. Their words, explicitly. Well, now he's talking about divestment quietly because of our civic pressure and our divestment movement. He didn't want to talk about divestment. They told us we scheduled with the wrong team. I think what he means is they scheduled us with the PR team and not the policy team. But here we are a year later. Governor Walz, this is my message to you. Stop hiding. Just admit you messed up. We call on you to publicly condemn Israel's genocide. Stop with this quiet, coy divestment. Say it. Use the language. We have divested the way we divested from South African apartheid. Condemn Israel's genocide. Call for a complete U.S. military divestment from Israel's war crimes. And invite the Palestinian constituents to meet with you the way that you met with your Jewish constituents. The way that you've decided to posture and center Zionist interests and Zionist demands in the community. Center Palestinian human rights. Visit our mosques the way you visited the synagogues. Visit our Palestinian places and centers and institutions. Spell it out publicly that your Palestinian constituents are human and that their human rights are central to your agenda as an elected official. Call for divestment. You have taken a step, but it is in fact the easiest step. And there's a whole staircase ahead. And at the top of the staircase is Palestinian liberation. Don't back down now.
Thank you, Sanaa. As you have heard, all of us recognize that our work is not done. The SBI in Minnesota remain complicit through its stock investments in companies that facilitate and profit from Israel's violations of international law and human rights. The struggle continues. This concludes the press conference. Again, thank you to everyone for being here. For members of the press, please see myself or Lisa Tabari here behind us. And for any detailed financial questions or documentations, please see Karen. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here.
Free Palestine! Free